Question for Corbett. I am really confused by the climate debate. I understand the university types are only looking after their careers, and so dissent is virtually non-existent, but it's hard to believe so few have the balls to tell the truth. Is it because it's so hard to find evidence to refute, or what is it? Also, it troubles me that big losers in climate change is the fossil fuel industry, which have gone out of their way to obfuscate and derail climate research. Why would they spend billions on counter-propaganda if it were all a hoax? All right, thank you for the question, Craig. I think the vast majority of scientists generally, or scientific people who give their imprimatur, their stamp of approval to the climate change alarmism hype hysteria, do so in basically ignorance of the details of that hysteria, the details of what it is they're giving their stamp to. And I say this advisedly, because it is the story that you read time and time and time again from all sorts of scientists who eventually do start questioning that climatic dogma. And when they start to arise from their slumbers and realize that they've been tricked, they're usually pretty mad about it. And there are many examples, one of which I'll point to you, Judith Curry, who was presenting at the Data or Dogma at the U.S. Senate late last year, where she gave her own testimony about how she came from being a blind believer in all things IPCC to someone who actually was looking into the science itself and finding, hey, wait, this isn't what they're saying.
I thank the chairman, the ranking members for the opportunity to offer testimony today. Prior to 2009, I felt that supporting the IPCC consensus on climate change was a responsible thing to do. I bought into the argument, don't trust what one scientist says, trust what an international team of 1,000 scientists has said after years of careful deliberation. That all changed for me in November 2009 following the leaked ClimateGate emails that illustrated the sausage making and even bullying that went into building the consensus. I started speaking out, saying that scientists needed to do better at making the data and supporting information publicly available, being more transparent about how they reach conclusions, doing a better job of assessing uncertainties, and actively engaging with scientists having minority perspectives. The response of my colleagues to this is summed up by the title of a 2010 article in the Scientific American. Climate heretic Judith Curry turns on her colleagues. I came to the growing realization that I had fallen into the trap of groupthink. I had accepted the consensus based on second-order evidence, the assertion that a consensus existed.
That's right, you will be called a heretic by this religious cult if you so much as dare to actually try to listen to some of the criticisms that have been leveled at this unquestionable religious dogma. It's absolutely insane to think that a scientific community is acting this way, and where there's smoke, there's fire, as people like Judith Curry and many other scientists have found when they've actually investigated this. So that explains, I think, a lot of the people on the very periphery of this issue, people who have credentials and are scientists in some field, who just understand, well, you know, obviously this is a scientific endeavor and, oh, it's the best peer-reviewed science, so it must be good, without looking into it themselves. But clearly there are people on the inside of this who are doing this work and who are engaged with this data and still believe. I think, again, I think for the most part, I don't think there are very, very many people who are involved in conscious manipulative deception here. I think that a lot of people really do believe it, and they will do those kinds of Asch conformity experiment pretzel twists to make themselves believe what they need to believe. In part, as you already, I think, said in the question, because of their already pre-existing commitment to this. This is what their career, their reputation, their life's work is based on. Therefore, it must be true. And there have been some startling examples of exactly that mentality that have been in plain black and white explained to us in so many words.
And in fact, I'm writing an article right now about a scientist. One of his pieces of information was that the world's warmed by 1 degree Fahrenheit or 0.6 degrees Celsius in the last 130 years. Well, he's refusing to disclose how he came up with that number. And I mean, I personally think that that's almost criminal. If you are, what are you hiding? If it's just numbers, what's the problem? And he actually wrote an email to Warwick Hughes, the Australian researcher, said, how did you get this number? And he said, why should I share that with you? It took 25 years of my work, and all you want to do is find fault with it. That's a scary comment coming from a scientist. He's still blocking it, by the way. He's using the UK Met Office to claim that there's confidentiality.
Yes, no, you can't make that up. That is an actual, real, direct quote from an email that was sent to Warwick Hughes on February 21st, 2005. Quote, "We have 25 or so years invested in the work. Why should I make the data available to you when your aim is to try and find something wrong with it?" End quote. Yes, a scientist said that. Not just any scientist. Want to guess who that was who wrote that email? Phil Jones of the Climatic Research Unit of the East Anglia University. Why does that ring? Oh, that's right, because a few years later, ClimateGate. And we got to see the inside details of their deliberations, including the fact that, yes, they literally broke the law in trying to hide this data from the public, and the only reason they weren't prosecuted is because of statute of limitations. Amazing, incredible stuff that's being done on the scientific side of things by people who not only should know better, but do know better, and are doing it because they have 25 years invested in this work. Why should I make it available to you? So that's the scientific side of this. But the other side that you raise is the big one, because everyone will, or 99.9% of people, if you go out on the street and take a poll, will say, absolutely, yeah, of course. I mean, there's climate science, and then there's this climate quackery of people who question that, who are all funded by big oil. I have yet to receive a paycheck, but anyway. And that's how it lines up. As you say in that question, Craig, billions are invested in this counter-propaganda. Actually, I might need a citation on that one. When you really start peeling back the layers of this, it's not very difficult, and you find it is the exact opposite of what we've been taught. I'll throw in some links here. Here's a link to a long list of warmest art organizations scientists haul in huge money from big oil and heavy industry that mentions such things as the Climate Research Unit, taking money and grants from BP in their Arctic marginal seas exploration operations. The Sierra Club with taking money from Aubrey McClendon, CEO of Chesapeake Energy. The Delhi Sustainable Research Development getting money from Rockefeller Foundation and Oil and Natural Gas Corporation of India. The Berkeley Earth Surface Temperature Team getting money from the Kochs and the Ann and Gordon Getty Foundation. The 350.org getting money from the Rockefeller Brothers Funds, the the Union of Concerned Scientists getting money from Chevron and BP Amoco and others, Climate Institute getting money from American Gas Foundation, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, Shell Foundation. The list goes on and on and on and on. Another one that came out recently was a very interesting story about Inside Climate News that was trying to spread this Exxon New hashtag, talking about a scandal that quickly imploded on itself. They have deep ties to the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, including a publisher who was a consultant for the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, but insisted they had no editorial ties to Rockefeller. Rockefellers had nothing to do with what Rockefellers promised access to publisher of Inside Climate News emails show. The World Wildlife Foundation, deep, intimate historical ties to Shell Oil. Of course, WWF founded by Prince Bernhard of the Royal Dutch Shell family. That's the Royal Dutch family. Etc. On and on and on and on. Let's give it a specific example from an article, There's Big Money in Global Warming Alarmism. Quote, "Yes, oil giants aren't foolish. They want to benefit and also don't want to suffer from the mania that surrounds all things climate change. Their activities are often mercenary. Oil companies will and do fund research that casts a bad light on coal, its main competitor, in hopes of lessening competition, but also in expectation of securing peace with activist groups. For instance, ExxonMobil recently pledged to give Stanford University up to $100 million in grant money over 10 years to support climate and energy research. Etc., etc. Shell Oil, since 1999, handed out $8.5 million in environmental grants. Like ExxonMobil, many grants flowed to the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, but $1.2 million went to the Nature Conservancy. The remainder was spread to several different environmentally minded groups. According to the Washington Times, British Petroleum regularly gave to several environmental groups such as Nature Conservancy, the World Wildlife Fund, the World Resources Institute, various branches of the Audubon Society, the Wildlife Habitat Council. It's important to understand that these groups accepted the money BP gave them. The Washington Post confirms the Nature Conservancy pocketed over $10 million in cash and land contributed from BP and affiliated corporations. Joanne Nova has documented the massive amount of money pouring from government into the pockets of individuals and groups associated with the environment. The U.S. government alone has provided over $79 billion since 1989 on policies related to climate change, including science and technology research, foreign aid, and tax breaks. Yes, 79 billion with a B. And again, that's really only scraping the top of the barrel of this barrel of scum of various groups that are pushing this. And the vast amounts of money that are sloshing through the global system right now into this, including money from the corporate oil giants. So lots of links there to explore. Now, here's the real question, and I think the question flips back. Why is it that everyone believes this line about big oil is funding all climate denial when big oil is demonstrably and on the record providing hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to the climate alarmist scandal itself, and not a peep in the media about that, not a peep from DeSmogBlog denouncing the Pew Research Council because, oh my god, they take money from natural gas companies and things like this. Why is that, do you think? Maybe there's a real question in there. Anyway, so this is much deeper and different than is ever presented in the establishment fake news. And again, I think there's a reason for that. Obviously, much more on this to come. Stay tuned.